The great council chamber was carved from the heart of the largest tree in the alien city. Smooth walls curved up to a high ceiling where natural light filtered through gaps in the living wood. 12 elder aliens sat in a circle on seats that grew from the floor itself, their golden eyes all focused on Jake, who stood in the center with 3 small cubs still clinging to him. Elder Zarthek spoke first, his voice echoing in the chamber. "We are gathered to judge the outsider Jake Martinez, who has broken our most sacred law. He has touched our cubs, entered our breeding grounds, and violated traditions that have protected our people for thousands of years." Jake felt the weight of 12 stares upon him. The cubs seemed to sense the danger, too. Pip pressed closer to his chest, making soft, worried sounds. Sage wrapped its arms around Jake's leg and refused to let go. Little Blue stood between Jake and the council, its small body tense and ready to defend him. "The law is clear," said Elder Mordan, an ancient alien with silver fur and scars across his face. "No outsider may touch our young. The penalty has always been death. It must remain so, or our enemies will think we have grown weak." Another elder, this one with dark fur and wise eyes, leaned forward. "But Velanya has found something in the old texts, something that may change our understanding." All eyes turned to Velanya, the keeper of their history. She was smaller than the other elders, with gray streaked fur and gentle movements. She held an ancient book made from pressed plant fibers. "The old stories speak of star walkers," Velanya said slowly. "Beings from other worlds who would come to help our people in times of great need. The texts say these star walkers would be recognized by our cubs, who would form heart bonds with them." Elder Mordan snorted in disbelief. "Children's stories, myths, and legends have no place in a court of law." "Are they myths?" Velanya asked. "Look at what we see before us. No cub in our history has ever bonded with an outsider. Yet these 3 refuse to leave his side. They cry when separated from him. They defend him with their own small bodies." Jake felt a surge of hope, but Elder Zarthek's expression remained stern. "Even if the old stories are true," Zarthek said, "the law exists for good reasons. Our enemies have tried to steal our cubs before. If we allow one outsider to touch them, others will think they can do the same." During this exchange, Dr. Lisa Park and the rest of Jake's crew had been brought to the chamber. They stood under guard near the entrance, watching the proceedings with worried faces. "May I speak?" Dr. Park called out. The elders looked at each other, then Elder Zarthek nodded. "You may approach, but do not touch the cubs." Dr. Park walked forward carefully, her hands visible and empty. "I'm a scientist who studies how different species behave. What I'm seeing here is extraordinary. These cubs have formed an emotional attachment to Captain Martinez that goes beyond anything in our records." "Your point?" Elder Mordan asked impatiently. "My point is that this isn't something that can be faked or forced," Dr. Park explained. "Young animals bond with those who care for them, protect them, and show them kindness. Your cubs chose Captain Martinez because he saved their lives." As if responding to her words, Sage left Jake's side and approached Dr. Park. The cub showed her the bandage on its leg, then pointed back at Jake and made soft sounds that seemed to be telling a story. "It's trying to tell you what happened," Dr. Park said quietly. "It wants you to understand that Jake helped them." Elder Velanya watched this interaction with great interest. In the old texts, it says that heart-bonded cubs would speak for their chosen Star Walker. They would testify to their protector's worth. Cubs cannot testify, Elder Morden said firmly. They are too young to understand law and justice. But, even as he spoke, Little Blue was doing something remarkable. The small cub had found a piece of soft earth near the chamber's edge. Using its small hands, it began to draw pictures in the dirt. First, it drew 3 small shapes under a larger shape, the cubs trapped under the fallen branch. Then it drew a taller shape coming to help, Jake rescuing them. Finally, it drew all the shapes together, safe and happy. The elders stared at this crude but clear story drawn in the earth. None of them had ever seen a cub communicate so deliberately before. "This is impossible," whispered Elder Fikran, a middle-aged alien with brown fur and kind eyes. "Cubs this young cannot think so clearly. They cannot plan or remember events in order." "Unless," Vilanya said softly, "the bond with their Star Walker has awakened something in them. The old texts speak of cubs becoming wiser and braver when heart-bonded with their chosen protector." Jake knelt down beside Little Blue and patted the small cub gently. "Thank you for trying to help me," he said quietly. The cub purred and leaned against him, then continued drawing. This time, it drew the shapes of adult aliens coming to the grove. It showed them angry and threatening. Then it drew the 3 small shapes standing between the tall shape and the angry ones, the cubs protecting. "Jake, they remember everything," Dr. Parks said in amazement. "And they're trying to tell you their side of the story." Elder Zarthek stood up from his seat, his face troubled. "Even if all this is true, we cannot simply ignore our laws. If we make an exception for this outsider, what happens when our enemies hear of it? What happens when other outsiders think they can enter our breeding grounds without consequence?" The chamber fell silent. Jake could see the difficult position the elders were in. They wanted to follow their laws, but they also couldn't ignore what they were seeing with their own eyes. Suddenly, Pip climbed up Jake's chest and perched on his shoulder. The small cub looked directly at Elder Zarthek and began to sing. It was a simple melody, but incredibly beautiful. The other cubs joined in, their voices blending together in harmony. The song was sad and sweet at the same time, full of emotion that touched everyone who heard it. "The song of bonding," Elder Vilanya whispered, tears forming in her golden eyes. "I thought it was lost forever. Only heart-bonded cubs can sing it." "How do you know this song?" Elder Fikran asked, leaning forward in wonder. "My grandmother sang it to me when I was very young," Vilanya replied. "She said it was the song cubs sang for their chosen protectors in the ancient days, before we lost the knowledge of heart bonding." The cubs finished their song and looked expectantly at the elders. Their meaning was clear. Jake was their chosen protector, and they were asking the council to recognize that bond. Elder Mordan shook his head stubbornly. "Songs and stories and drawings in the dirt. None of this changes the law." But Elder Zarthek was looking at Jake with new understanding. "Tell me, outsider, what do you feel when you look at these cubs?" Jake thought carefully before answering. "I feel like I would do anything to protect them. I feel like they trust me completely and I can't bear the thought of letting them down. I feel like they're family." "And what of your own people?" Zarthek asked. "Would you abandon them to stay with our cubs?" Jake looked at his crew, then back at the 3 small faces looking up at him with complete trust. "I wouldn't abandon my people, but I wouldn't abandon these little ones either. There has to be a way for both." Elder Zarthek sat back down, deep in thought. The other elders watched him, waiting for his decision. "The law says no outsider may touch our cubs," Zartek said finally. "But these cubs have chosen this outsider as their protector. They sing the ancient songs for him. They defend him. They refuse to be separated from him." He paused, looking around the chamber at his fellow elders. "Perhaps," he continued slowly, "the question is not whether he has broken our law, but whether our law is complete. Perhaps we need new words for new situations that our ancestors never imagined." The chamber erupted in discussion as the elders debated among themselves. Some agreed with Zartek. Others insisted that the old law must stand unchanged. Jake stood in the center of it all, holding 3 small cubs who had somehow become the most important things in his world. Whatever the council decided, he knew his life would never be the same again. The debate continued for hours, but Jake barely heard it. All his attention was focused on the 3 small beings who had chosen him as their protector, and on the impossible bond that had formed between a human and alien cubs in the span of a single day. Jake tried to leave the grove 3 times, but each time the cubs started crying so loudly that he had to come back. They clung to his legs with their small hands, refusing to let him go. Their eyes filled with tears when he moved away, and they made heartbreaking sounds that reminded him of human babies calling for their mothers. "Come on, little ones," Jake whispered, kneeling down to their level. "I helped you, but now I have to go. Your real families will come looking for you soon." But the cubs didn't understand. The smallest one, with golden fur and bright blue eyes, crawled into Jake's lap and curled up like a kitten. The middle cub, whose leg Jake had bandaged, kept touching the medical wrap and then touching Jake's hand as if thanking him. The largest cub, with dark brown fur and serious eyes, stood guard beside Jake like a tiny protector. Jake found himself naming them in his mind. The small golden one became Pip because of the soft, peeping sounds it made. The injured one became Sage because it seemed wise beyond its years. The protective one became Little Blue because of its beautiful blue-black fur that shined in the light. The storm was completely gone now. Sunlight filtered through the leaves above, creating patterns on the grass. Jake knew that adult aliens would come to check the breeding ground soon. He had to find a way to leave without the cubs following him. "Stay here," Jake said firmly, standing up and pointing to the ground. "Stay." The cubs understood his tone, if not his words. They sat where he pointed, but their eyes followed his every movement. Jake backed toward the edge of the grove slowly, hoping they would stay put. He almost made it to the red stones when the cubs panicked. All 3 began crying at once, loud wailing sounds that carried through the forest. They ran after Jake, stumbling, on their short legs but determined not to be left behind. Pip reached him first, grabbing his pant leg and holding on with surprising strength. "No, no, no," Jake said, trying to gently remove the cub's hands. "You can't come with me, it's not safe." But Sage and Little Blue reached him too, and suddenly Jake was surrounded by 3 desperate cubs who refused to be separated from him. Their crying grew louder and more panicked. The sound carried through the forest, and Jake heard something that made his blood freeze. Answering calls. Deep, powerful voices responding to the cubs' cries. Adult aliens were coming, and they were coming fast. Jake's mind raced. He could try to run, but the cubs would follow him and probably get hurt. He could try to hide, but there was nowhere to go in the open grove. He could try to explain, but who would believe that he just happened to be in the forbidden breeding ground during a storm? The adult voices got closer. Jake could hear branches breaking as large bodies moved through the forest at high speed. In moments they would reach the grove and find him with their most precious young. "I'm sorry," Jake said to the cubs, who were still clinging to him. "I'm really sorry about this." The first adult alien burst into the grove like a force of nature. It was huge, much larger than Elder Zarthek, with muscles that rippled under thick brown fur. It carried a weapon that looked like a spear with an energy blade at the tip. Its golden eyes locked onto Jake immediately, and its face twisted into an expression of pure rage. Two more adults appeared behind the first one. They spread out around the grove, surrounding Jake and the cubs. Their weapons were raised and ready to strike. "Outsider!" the first alien roared, his voice so loud that birds flew out of nearby trees. "You dare touch our sacred young?" Jake raised his hand slowly, trying to show he wasn't a threat. "I can explain. They were hurt in the storm. I was just trying to help them." "Lies!" another alien snarled. "No outsider enters the breeding grounds by accident. You came here to steal our cubs." The cubs seemed to sense the danger. Instead of running to the adults like Jake expected, they pressed closer to him. Pip crawled back into his lap. Sage wrapped its arms around Jake's leg. Little Blue stood in front of Jake, making small growling sounds at the adult aliens. The warriors stopped advancing, confused by what they were seeing. "The cubs," one of them said slowly. "Why do they protect the outsider?" "It doesn't matter," the first warrior said, raising his weapon. "The law is clear. Death to any outsider who touches our young." But when he stepped forward, all three cubs cried out in alarm. They clung to Jake tighter, their small voices raised in distress. "Wait," the second warrior said. "Look at them. I have never seen cubs act this way." Jake could see the confusion in the aliens' eyes. They had expected to find their cubs cowering from a dangerous intruder. Instead, they found their most precious young ones protecting that intruder with their own small bodies. "Please," Jake said carefully. "I know I broke your law, but they were trapped under a fallen branch. They were hurt and scared. I couldn't just leave them to die." "You lie," the first warrior said again, but his voice was less certain now. Sage suddenly left Jake's side and ran to the fallen branch. The cub pointed at it and made urgent sounds, then ran back to Jake and pointed at the bandage on its leg. Little Blue joined in, acting out how the branch had fallen. Pip just held on to Jake and purred. The warriors looked at the branch, then at the cubs, then at Jake. Their weapons lowered slightly. "They were trapped?" the second warrior asked. "Yes," Jake said. "The storm brought the branch down on top of them. I heard them crying and came to help. I know I shouldn't have touched them, but I couldn't let babies suffer." "Silence," a new voice commanded. Elder Zarthek stepped into the grove, followed by more warriors. His face was dark with anger, and his golden eyes blazed like fire. He looked at Jake, at the cubs, and at his confused warriors. "Explain this," Zarthek said in a voice like cold steel. The first warrior spoke quickly. "We found the outsider with the cubs, Elder. But the young ones, they defend him. They will not leave his side." "Impossible," Zarthek said. "Cubs do not bond with outsiders. It goes against their nature." But as he spoke, Pip made a soft sound and reached toward the elder with one small hand, while keeping the other hand firmly wrapped around Jake's shirt. Sage showed Zarthek the bandage on its leg, then patted Jake's hand gently. Little Blue moved to stand between Jake and the elder, its small chest puffed out bravely. Zarthek stared at the cubs in shock. In all his long years, he had never seen anything like this. "How is this possible?" he whispered. "I don't know," Jake said honestly. "I just helped them when they were hurt. That's all." "You touched our sacred young," Zarthek said, his voice growing hard again. "The penalty is death. It has always been death. Then you'll have to kill me while they're holding." "On to me," Jake said quietly, "because I don't think they're going to let go." As if to prove his point, the cubs pressed even closer to Jake. Their small hands gripped his clothes, his arms, his legs. They looked up at the adult aliens with determined expressions that seemed to say, "You'll have to go through us first." Zarthek stood silent for a long moment, staring at the impossible scene before him. Finally, he spoke to his warriors. "Bring them all back to the city. The outsider will face judgment before the full council." And the cubs... He paused, watching as they refused to leave Jake's side even for a moment. "The cubs come too. We need to understand what has happened here." Two warriors moved forward to take Jake's arms, but the cubs immediately began crying again. They held onto him so tightly that the warriors couldn't separate them without hurting the young ones. "Let him walk freely," Zarthek said finally. "But surround him. If he tries to run..." "I won't run," Jake said. "Where would I go? Besides..." He looked down at the three small faces looking up at him with complete trust. "I don't think they'd let me leave even if I tried." As they walked back toward the alien city, Jake realized that his life was now in the hands of three small cubs who had decided, for reasons no one understood, that he belonged to them, and the strangest part was, Jake was starting to feel like they were right. 3 days had passed since the humans arrived on the alien world. Jake Martinez was leading a small team to study the plant life in the forest areas around the city. Dr. Lisa Park wanted samples of the local plants, and Chris Bailey was interested in how the aliens made their buildings grow from living trees. The morning had started bright and clear. Jake, Dr. Park, and Amy Foster walked along a forest path, their equipment packs heavy with scientific tools. The alien trees were amazing to see up close. Some were so wide that 10 humans holding hands couldn't wrap around them. Others grew in spirals, reaching toward the sky like green towers. "Look at this," Dr. Park said, kneeling beside a flower that glowed with soft blue light. The petals seemed to store energy from the sun and release it slowly. Amy was recording everything with her camera. "The aliens will probably want to see our findings before we take anything back to the ship." Jake nodded, watching the path ahead. The forest was peaceful, with gentle sounds of birds and insects. Small animals moved through the trees, most of them looking like Earth creatures, but with subtle differences. A squirrel-like animal had 6 legs instead of 4. A bird sang with 2 voices at the same time. "Captain," Amy said, looking at her weather scanner, "there's a big storm coming. We should head back soon." Jake checked his own instruments. The readings showed a massive weather system moving toward them fast. On this world, storms could be dangerous. The rain fell in sheets, and the wind could knock down even the strongest humans. "Pack up," Jake ordered. "We need to get back to the city now." They gathered their equipment quickly and started back along the path. But the storm moved faster than they expected. Dark clouds rolled over the forest like a wave, blocking out the sun. The wind began to howl through the trees. Rain started falling in large drops, then became a downpour. The path turned muddy and slippery. Jake led his team as fast as he could, but the storm was getting worse every minute. "This way!" Jake shouted over the wind, pointing toward what looked like a shortcut through the trees. They left the main path and pushed through thick bushes. Branches whipped at their faces, and the rain made it hard to see. Lightning flashed overhead, followed by thunder that shook the ground. "Stay together," Jake called back to his team. But when he turned around, he couldn't see them anymore. The rain and wind had separated them somehow. "Amy! Dr. Park!" Jake shouted, but the storm swallowed his words. He tried to go back the way he came, but all the trees looked the same in the storm. The rain was so heavy he could barely see 5 feet in front of him. Lightning struck a tree nearby, and Jake had to jump out of the way as it crashed down. Thunder boomed overhead again and again. Jake was completely lost now, alone in an alien forest during the worst storm he had ever seen. He needed shelter fast, or the storm might kill him. Through the rain and wind, Jake saw a break in the trees ahead. He pushed toward it, hoping to find some kind of shelter. When he reached the clearing, he found a grove of smaller trees that formed a natural circle. Their branches grew together overhead, creating a roof that blocked most of the rain. Jake stumbled into the shelter, grateful to be out of the worst of the storm. Water dripped from his clothes as he looked around. The grove was quiet and peaceful, compared to the chaos outside. Soft grass covered the ground, and strange flowers grew in neat patterns. It was then that Jake noticed the red stones. They were small and smooth, placed in a perfect circle around the edge of the grove. Jake's heart sank as he remembered Elder Zarthek's warning. Red stones meant this was a breeding ground. This was where the aliens kept their cubs. Jake started to leave immediately, but another lightning strike hit a tree right outside the grove. The tree fell across the only clear exit, blocking his way out. He was trapped in the forbidden place. Just stay quiet and wait for the storm to pass, Jake told himself. Don't touch anything. Don't look around too much. Just wait. But then he heard something that made his blood run cold. It was crying. Soft, weak crying that sounded like it came from something very young and very scared. Jake stood frozen, listening. The crying came again, from somewhere deeper in the grove. It was the sound of babies in pain, calling for help. Every instinct. Jake had told him to go help whatever was making that sound. But Elder Zarthek's words echoed in his mind. To break this law means death. The crying continued, getting weaker. Jake closed his eyes and tried to block it out, but he couldn't. He was a human being, and human beings helped babies when they cried. It was as simple as that. Jake followed the sound deeper into the grove. Behind a cluster of flowering bushes, he found them. 3 small aliens lay trapped under a fallen branch. They looked like tiny versions of the adults, covered in soft fur that was now muddy and wet. Their large eyes were full of pain and fear. One had a cut on its leg. Another seemed to have trouble breathing. They were alien cubs, the most forbidden thing on this planet for him to see or touch. The cubs saw Jake and cried louder, reaching their small hands toward him. They were asking for help in the only way they knew how. Jake's mind raced. If he helped them, he would break the alien law and face execution. If he didn't help them, they might die. The branch that trapped them was too heavy for such small creatures to move. More lightning struck outside the grove. The storm was getting worse, and these babies were getting weaker. Jake made his choice. He knelt beside the trapped cubs and carefully lifted the heavy branch. The cubs scrambled free, but they were hurt and scared. The first cub's leg was bleeding badly. The second was making wheezing sounds when it breathed. The third seemed okay but wouldn't stop crying. Jake opened his emergency medical kit. He had basic supplies that worked on most life forms. Carefully, gently, he cleaned the cut on the first cub's leg and bandaged it. He gave the second cub a breathing treatment that helped clear its airways. He checked the third cub for injuries and found only bruises. As he worked, something strange happened. The cubs stopped crying and started making soft purring sounds. They seemed to trust him completely, even though they had never seen a human before. When Jake finished treating their injuries, he expected the cubs to run away. Instead, they crawled closer to him. They curled up against his legs, still purring softly. "You guys should probably go find your parents," Jake said quietly. But the cubs didn't leave. They seemed determined to stay close to him as if he was their protector now. The storm began to calm outside. Jake knew he had to get out of this place before any adult aliens found him here. But when he tried to stand up, the cubs cried again and held onto his legs with their small hands. "I can't stay here," Jake told them. "Your people will kill me if they find me with you." The cubs didn't understand his words, but they seemed to understand that he was trying to leave. They held on tighter, making sad sounds that broke Jake's heart. Thunder rumbled in the distance as the storm moved away. Soon, adult aliens would come to check on their cubs. Jake had to go now, or he would face the death penalty for touching their most sacred young. But as he looked down at the three small faces looking up at him with complete trust, Jake realized his biggest problem wasn't the alien law. His biggest problem was that he was already starting to love these little creatures, and they seemed to love him back. The ship Wanderer moved slowly through space toward the green planet below. Captain Jake Martinez stood on the bridge, watching the world grow larger on the main screen. 3 months of travel had brought them here, following strange signals from deep space. "Scans show intelligent life," said Dr. Lisa Park, looking up from her station. She was the ship's expert on alien life forms. Her voice carried excitement mixed with worry. "The signals are coming from large settlements in the jungle areas." Jake nodded and turned to his security chief. "Ryan, what do you think about landing?" Ryan Cole checked his weapon systems one more time. He was always careful about new worlds. "The life forms are bigger than humans, much bigger, but they don't seem hostile right now." The green planet filled the screen completely now. Jake could see thick forests covering most of the land. Rivers ran like silver lines through the trees. Cities dotted the landscape, but they looked different from human cities. The buildings seemed to grow from the trees themselves. "Take us down to the landing coordinates," Jake ordered, "but stay ready to leave quickly if needed." The Wanderer descended through thick clouds. When they broke through, Jake saw the alien city clearly for the first time. The buildings were tall and curved, made from what looked like living wood. Bridges connected the structures high above the ground. Everything looked natural, as if the aliens had grown their city instead of building. The ship landed in a clearing near the city. Jake gathered his team. Besides Dr. Park and Ryan, he brought Amy Foster from Communications and Chris Bailey, his best engineer. They put on their protective suits and checked their equipment. "Remember," Jake told his team, "we're here to make friends, not enemies. Follow my lead and stay calm." They walked down the ship's ramp onto soft grass. The air smelled sweet, like flowers and rain. Tall trees surrounded them, their leaves making soft sounds in the gentle wind. Jake had been to many worlds, but this one felt different. It felt alive in a way that was hard to explain. They didn't wait long before the aliens appeared. The first thing Jake noticed was how tall they were. The aliens stood at least 8 feet high, with long, strong bodies covered in short fur. Their faces looked like cats, but intelligent cats that could stand and walk like humans. Their ears were pointed and moved constantly, listening to sounds Jake couldn't hear. Their eyes were large and golden, watching everything. The leader stepped forward. He wore robes made from plant fibers and carried a staff topped with a glowing crystal. When he spoke, a device on his belt translated his words into English. "I am Zarthek, Elder of the Tree Council," he said. His voice was deep and careful. "You are the star travelers our watchers reported." Jake stepped forward and removed his helmet, showing his face. "I am Captain Jake Martinez of the Earth ship Wanderer. We come in peace, hoping to learn about your people and share knowledge." Zarthek's golden eyes studied Jake for a long moment. "You are smaller than our story said star travelers would be, but you carry yourself like a leader. This is good." Dr. Park stepped up beside Jake. "We're scientists and explorers. We want to understand your world and your people." "Understanding requires trust," Zarthek replied. "Trust requires time. But first, you must know our most important law." The elder's expression became very serious. The other aliens behind him stood straighter, as if ready for something important. "In our culture, our young are sacred," Zarthek continued. "Our cubs are kept in special places, protected by our strongest warriors. No outsider may touch them. No outsider may even see them without permission. To break this law means death." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "We understand. We won't go near your young ones." "The breeding grounds are marked with red stones," Zarthek explained. "If you see red stones in a circle, turn away immediately. Do not enter. Do not look inside. Our cubs are precious to us beyond your understanding." Ryan shifted nervously beside Jake. "What if someone enters by accident?" Zarthek's eyes grew cold. "There are no accidents with our laws, only choices. Choose wisely." Dr. Park quickly spoke up. "We respect your customs. Can you tell us more about your people, your culture?" The tension seemed to ease a little. Zarthek gestured toward the city. "Come. We will show you the outer districts. You may stay in the guest quarters while we decide if you can be trusted with more knowledge." They walked along a path made of smooth stones. Jake noticed how the aliens moved with quiet grace, their feet making almost no sound. The city was beautiful, with gardens everywhere and water flowing in small streams between the buildings. "How long have your people lived here?" Amy asked. "Many thousands of years," Zarthek replied. "We have grown our cities slowly, living with the forest instead of destroying it. Your people build with dead materials. We build with living ones." Chris pointed to a bridge that seemed to be made from a single large branch. "How do you make the trees grow the way you want?" "Patience and understanding," Zarthek said. "We sing to the trees. We feed them. We ask them to help us, and they answer." As they walked deeper into the city, Jake saw more aliens going about their daily lives. Some tended gardens, others worked with their hands, shaping wood and stone. Children played in the streets, but Jake noticed they were always watched by adults. "Your young ones," Dr. Park observed. "They seem very protected." "Family is everything to us," Zarthek said firmly. "Our cubs are our future. We have enemies who would steal them if they could. This is why our laws exist." They reached a building that looked like it had been carved from a single massive tree trunk. These are the guest quarters, Zarthek said. You may stay here while we talk about your request to study our world. Jake bowed slightly. Thank you for your hospitality. Remember the law about our cubs, Zarthek said one more time. It is not just tradition, it is survival. Break it, and you will not live to regret it. As the aliens left, Jake's team gathered in their temporary home. The rooms were comfortable, with furniture grown from living wood and windows that looked out over the forest city. They seemed friendly enough, Ryan said, but that warning about their cubs was serious. Very serious, Dr. Park agreed. We need to be extra careful while we're here. Jake nodded, looking out at the alien city. He had no idea that in just a few days, a storm would change everything. He had no idea that he would soon face a choice between following alien law and following his human heart. For now, he was just happy to have made peaceful contact with a new species. The real test was still to come. The council had been debating for 3 hours when Elder Velanya suddenly stood up, her eyes bright with discovery. She held an even older book than before, its pages yellow with age and its binding held together with careful repairs. I must speak, she said urgently. I have found something that changes everything. The debate stopped immediately. All 12 elders turned to listen to the keeper of their history. Jake felt the cubs stir against him. They had been napping, while the adults argued, tired from their big day. This book is from our earliest records, Velanya continued, holding the ancient text carefully. It tells the true story of why we forbid outsiders to touch our cubs. Elder Mordan frowned deeply. We know why. To protect them from being stolen by enemies. That is part of the truth, Velanya said. But not all of it. Listen to what our ancestors wrote. In the time of the great wars, when the Scareks came, from the dark worlds they stole our young to make them into weapons. We learned to hide our cubs, to keep them from all outsiders, to kill any stranger who came near them. This law saved our people, but it also made us forget the older truth. She turned the page carefully and continued reading. Before the wars, before the fear, our cubs could choose their own protectors from any people who showed them kindness. These chosen ones, called cub hearts, were given the honor of helping to raise our young. Some cub hearts were from other tribes, some were from other worlds. The cubs always chose wisely, for they could see into the hearts of those around them. The chamber was completely silent now. Even the cubs seemed to be listening, their large eyes focused on Velanya. There is more, she said, her voice growing, excited. The heart bond between cub and chosen protector brought great benefits to both. The cubs became wiser and stronger. The protectors gained the fierce loyalty of our people. But when the wars came, we forgot this wisdom in our need to survive. We chose safety over trust, fear over hope. Elder Zarthek leaned forward. What else do the records say about these cub hearts? Velanya turned several pages, searching for specific passages. A true cub heart will be chosen by the cubs themselves. They cannot choose wrongly, for their instincts reach deeper than thought or reason. The cubs will sing for their chosen one. They will defend their protector even from their own people. They will refuse to be separated even in the face of death. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Everything described in the ancient text matched exactly what had happened with Pip, Sage, and Little Blue. Is there more? Elder Fikran asked quietly. Yes, Velanya said, finding another passage. When a cub heart is found, it is a sign that our people are ready to grow beyond old fears. The chosen protector becomes family to the cubs and their birth parents. They become a bridge between our people and other worlds. They bring new knowledge and new friendship. Elder Mordan shook his head stubbornly. Ancient stories written by people who lived in easier times. They did not face the threats we face today. Didn't they? Velanya challenged. The Scareks are still out there. Our enemies still want to harm us. But hiding from the galaxy forever is not the answer. Perhaps it is time to remember the old wisdom. She found one final passage and read it aloud. The return of the Cub Hearts will mark the beginning of a new age for our people. No longer will we hide in fear. No longer will we face our enemies alone. The Starwalkers will stand with us, chosen by our own young, proven by their love for our cubs. The silence that followed was broken by a soft sound from Jake's arms. Pip had woken up and was looking around at all the serious adult faces. The small cub made a questioning noise, as if asking why everyone looked so worried. Jake gently stroked Pip's golden fur. "It's okay, little one. The grown-ups are just trying to figure some things out." Sage and Little Blue stirred too, sensing the tension in the room. But instead of being afraid, they seemed curious about all the attention they were getting. Elder Velanya approached slowly, her movements careful and non-threatening. The cubs watched her but didn't seem alarmed. "May I try something?" she asked Jake. Jake nodded, curious about what she had in mind. Velanya knelt down and spoke to the cubs in their own language, using soft, gentle sounds. She pointed to Jake, and then to herself, asking them something. Pip immediately shook its small head and held on to Jake tighter. Sage made a negative sound and patted Jake's hand protectively. Little Blue actually moved to stand between Velanya and Jake. Its small body tense. "What did you ask them?" Jake wondered. "I asked if they would like to come with me instead of staying with you," Velanya explained. Their answer was very clear. She tried again, this time asking the cubs if they would like to go to their birth parents. Again, the cubs refused, clinging to Jake and making distressed sounds at the suggestion. "But watch this," Velanya said. She asked the cubs something else, and their reaction was completely different. They perked up, made happy sounds, and nodded eagerly. "What did you ask that time?" "I asked if they would like their birth parents to come here and meet you," Velanya said with a smile. "They want their families to know their chosen protector." "Elder," Zarthek stood up slowly, his expression thoughtful. "Send word to the birth parents. Bring them here immediately." While they waited, the elders continued to discuss the implications of Velanya's discovery. Some were excited about the possibility of returning to the old ways. Others worried about the risks of changing ancient laws. Jake found himself in the strange position of being at the center of a debate that could reshape an entire civilization, all because he had helped 3 hurt babies during a storm. Dr. Park approached carefully and was allowed to sit near Jake and the cubs. "How are you holding up?" she asked quietly. "I'm okay," Jake said, though he felt overwhelmed by everything that was happening. "I just keep thinking about how simple it seemed at the time. They were hurt, so I helped them. Now it's become this huge thing that might change their whole society." "Sometimes the most important changes start with simple acts of kindness," Dr. Park said. Little Blue seemed to like Dr. Park and crawled over to show her the drawing it had made earlier. The cub pointed to different parts of the picture and made soft, explanatory sounds, as if telling the whole story again. "They're remarkably intelligent," Dr. Park observed. "Much more advanced than cubs their age should be according to what we were told." "The heart bond," Velanya said, overhearing. The ancient texts say it awakens the cubs' minds faster than normal. They become smarter, braver, more able to communicate. When the birth parents arrived, Jake expected them to be angry or upset. Instead, they seemed nervous and confused. The three adult aliens approached slowly, their eyes moving between Jake and their cubs. The cubs saw their birth parents and made happy sounds, but they didn't run to them. Instead, they seemed to want to introduce Jake to their families. Pip's mother was a gentle-looking alien with golden fur like her cub. She spoke softly to Pip, who chattered back excitedly and kept pointing at Jake. "What is Pip saying?" Jake asked. Velanya listened to the exchange and translated. "Pip is telling its mother that you saved them from the fallen branch. It says you are good and kind, and that its mother should like you too." Similar conversations were happening with Sage's and Little Blue's parents. The cubs were clearly trying to convince their families that Jake was trustworthy. After several minutes of discussion, Pip's mother approached Jake directly. She spoke slowly, and Velanya translated. She says that if her cub has chosen you as protector, then she trusts that choice. She asks if you will accept the responsibility of being Pip's cub heart. Jake looked down at the small golden cub in his arms, then at the hopeful face of its mother. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means you become part of their family," Velanya explained. "You help care for the cub, protect it, teach it. In return, you gain the love and loyalty of the entire family group." Sage's and Little Blue's parents stepped forward too, making similar offers. All three families were willing to accept Jake as their cub's chosen protector. Elder Zarthek watched all of this with wonder in his golden eyes. "In all my years, I have never seen anything like this. The ancient ways are returning, just as the texts predicted." He looked around at his fellow elders, then made his decision. "Jake Martinez," he said formally, "by the choice of our cubs and the consent of their families, I name you the first cub heart in 1,000 years. May this bond bring peace between our peoples and strength to face whatever dangers may come." The cubs seemed to understand that something important had just happened. They all snuggled closer to Jake and began to purr loudly, their small bodies vibrating with happiness. Jake realized that his life had just changed forever, but as he looked down at three small faces full of trust and love, he knew he wouldn't have it any other way. The days that followed Jake's naming as Cubheart were unlike anything he had ever experienced. The Alien Council had decided he could not return to his ship while they studied this unprecedented situation. Instead, Jake was given quarters in the city, with the cubs staying close by his side at all times. Jake quickly learned that caring for alien cubs was both wonderful and exhausting. Pip was curious about everything and had a talent for getting into trouble. The small golden cub would climb onto furniture, explore every corner of their quarters, and ask endless questions in its chittering language that Jake was slowly learning to understand. Sage was quieter but incredibly smart. The middle cub seemed to understand human emotions and would often comfort Jake when he felt homesick or worried. Sage also had a gift for solving problems and would often figure out how to open containers or work simple mechanisms just by watching Jake do it once. Little Blue was the protector of the group. Despite being the smallest, the dark-furred cub positioned itself between Jake and any potential threat. When other aliens visited their quarters, Little Blue would stand guard until it was sure the visitors were friendly. Dr. Park was allowed to visit Jake every day to check on his health and study the developing bond between human and cubs. She brought news from the Wanderer and updates on the negotiations between the human crew and the alien council. "The council is divided," she told Jake one afternoon as they watched the cubs play with toys made from woven grass. "Some elders think this bond proves that your people can be trusted. Others worry that accepting humans means opening their world to unknown dangers." Jake nodded, gently removing Pip from his shoulder where the cub had been trying to braid his hair. "What do Ryan and the others think?" "Ryan is ready to fight the entire alien army to get you back," Dr. Park said with a smile. "Amy and Chris are fascinated by the technology here and keep asking if they can study the living buildings. Everyone misses you, but they understand why you can't leave the cubs." It was true. Jake had tried to spend just one night on the ship, but the cubs had become so distressed that they made themselves sick. They refused to eat and cried constantly until Jake returned. The alien doctors said the heart bond made separation physically painful for the cubs, especially so early in its formation. "The council wants to test the bond," Dr. Park continued. "They want to see how deep it really goes." "What kind of tests?" Jake asked, feeling protective of the cubs immediately. "Nothing harmful," Dr. Park assured him quickly. "They want to observe how the cubs react to various situations, how they behave when you're happy versus when you're sad, how they respond to threats against you, that sort of thing." The tests began the next day. Elder Velanya led a team of alien scientists who studied every aspect of Jake's interaction with the cubs. They measured the cubs' stress levels, observed their behavior patterns, and documented the remarkable intelligence the cubs displayed when working with their chosen protector. One test involved Jake pretending to be hurt. When he acted like he was in pain, all three cubs immediately rushed to comfort him. Pip climbed onto his chest and purred loudly, a sound that actually seemed to have healing properties. Sage brought Jake water and food, somehow knowing that injured beings needed care. Little Blue stood guard, watching for threats and ready to defend Jake from any danger. "Remarkable," murmured Dr. Kethmore, one of the alien scientists. "The cubs' response is immediate and coordinated. They instinctively know how to help." Another test showed how the cubs reacted when Jake was separated from them by a clear barrier. Even though they could see him, the cubs became agitated and worked together to find a way around the barrier. Their problem-solving abilities were far beyond what anyone expected from cubs their age. The most interesting test came when the scientists brought in a stranger, an alien Jake had never met before. The cubs immediately moved to protect Jake, positioning themselves between him and the newcomer. But when Jake showed that he welcomed the stranger by shaking hands, the cubs relaxed and became friendly. "They take their cues from you," Velanya observed. "Your emotions guide their responses. If you trust someone, they trust them. If you're afraid, they become protective." "It works both ways," Jake said, noticing how the cubs' moods affected his own feelings. When they were happy and playful, he felt energized and optimistic. When they were sad or scared, he felt an overwhelming need to comfort and protect them. But the most important test came unexpectedly. Jake was in his quarters with the cubs when alarms began sounding throughout the city. The deep, booming sounds meant danger was approaching, something the aliens took very seriously. Elder Zarthek burst into Jake's quarters with several warriors behind him. "Raiders," he said grimly. "Scarek ships have been spotted approaching our world. They come to steal our young, as they have for generations." Jake felt the cubs press closer to him, sensing the fear in the adult aliens. "What can I do to help?" Zarthek looked surprised by the question. "You are under judgment. You should be seeking safety, not offering to fight." "These cubs chose me as their protector," Jake said firmly. "That means protecting them from all threats, not just storms and fallen branches." The cubs seemed to understand what was happening. Instead of cowering in fear like normal cubs would, they looked up at Jake with determined expressions. Pip made a soft sound that seemed to say, "We're ready." Sage and Little Blue positioned themselves beside Jake, small but brave. The Scarex. "We'll target the breeding grounds first," Zarthek said. "It is what they always do. Our warriors will defend the area, but if they break through, then I'll be there too," Jake said without hesitation. Zarthek stared at Jake for a long moment. "You would risk your life for cubs that are not even your own species?" "They are my cubs now," Jake said simply. "The bond goes both ways. The elders—" Expression softened slightly. "Very well. But you are not a warrior. Stay back and protect the cubs if our defenses fail." As the adults prepared for battle, something remarkable happened. The cubs began to sing, not the bonding song they had sung before, but something new. It was a song of courage and determination, and somehow Jake understood that they were singing it for him. Other cubs throughout the city heard the song and began to sing along. Soon, the entire breeding ground area was filled with the sound of young voices raised in harmony. The adult aliens stopped their preparations to listen in amazement. "The battle song," whispered one of the warriors. "Our cubs have remembered the battle song of the ancient days." "What does it mean?" Jake asked. "It means they believe in you," Velanya said, appearing beside them. "It means they know their protector will keep them safe." As the Scarex ships grew closer, Jake realized that this would be the ultimate test of the heart bond. Not a test designed by scientists, but a real test of life and death. The cubs stayed close to Jake as they were moved to a secure location, near the breeding grounds. Warriors took positions around the area, their weapons ready. Jake could see the fear in their eyes, but also determination. These people would fight to the death to protect their young. Jake looked down at Pip, Sage, and Little Blue. 3 small cubs who had chosen him as their protector. 3 innocent lives depending on him to keep them safe. "I won't let anything happen to you," he promised them quietly. "No matter what." The cubs looked up at him with complete trust in their large eyes. They believed in him absolutely, and Jake realized that their faith made him stronger and braver than he had ever been before. In the distance, the first explosions began as the Scarex ships entered the planet's atmosphere. The real test was about to begin, and Jake Martinez, human, outsider, chosen protector, was ready to prove that the heart bond between species was stronger than any law or tradition. The cubs sensed his determination and pressed closer to him, purring softly. They were ready too, ready to face whatever came with their chosen cub heart by their side. The Scarex ships descended through the clouds like dark metal birds of prey. Jake watched from the breeding ground's defensive position as the enemy vessels circled the alien city, their hulls scarred and weapon-heavy. These raiders had been attacking peaceful worlds for generations, stealing young to sell as slaves or train as soldiers. 3 ships, reported Commander Thekvar, the lead warrior defending the breeding grounds. Standard raiding formation. They will try to land close to the nursery areas and take as many cubs as they can carry. Jake held Pip, Sage, and Little Blue close to him. The cubs were scared but trying to be brave, making soft, comforting sounds to each other. Other cubs throughout the area looked to Jake's 3 with wonder. Never before had cubs shown such courage during a Scarex attack. "Captain Martinez," called Elder Zarthek as he approached their position. "You should take the cubs to the deep shelters. If the Scaraks break through our defenses—" "No," Jake said firmly. "If they break through, the cubs will need their protector here, not hiding underground." "You are still under judgment," Zarthek reminded him. "You have no obligation to fight for us." Jake looked down at the three small faces looking up at him, with complete trust. "Yes, I do." The first Scarex ship landed in a nearby clearing with a crash that shook the ground. The second ship touched down closer to the city, disgorging armored raiders who immediately began advancing toward the residential areas. The third ship, the largest one, headed straight for the breeding grounds. "They know exactly where to attack," Commander Thekvar said grimly. "Someone has given them intelligence about our defenses." Jake watched the approaching ship and felt something click in his mind. Years of military training from his time in Earth Space Forces came flooding back. He began to see the tactical situation clearly, the Scarex strategy, the weaknesses in the alien defenses, the opportunities for counterattack. "Commander," Jake said urgently, "your warriors are positioned wrong. The Scarex will use those rock formations as cover to get close to the breeding ground entrance. You need to move half your force to the ridgeline to catch them in crossfire." Thekvar looked at Jake with surprise. "You understand warfare?" "I was a military officer before I became an explorer," Jake said. "The Scarex are using standard raiding tactics. Predictable, but effective if you don't counter them properly." The Scarex ship landed and began disgorging raiders. They were ugly creatures, smaller than the cat-like aliens, but heavily armed and armored. They moved with the efficiency of professional soldiers, immediately spreading out to secure their landing zone. "There," Jake pointed to a group of raiders moving toward a weak point in the defenses. "They're going to try to flank your left side. If you don't stop them there, they'll break through and reach the cubs." Commander Thekvar hesitated for only a moment, then began issuing new orders to his warriors. The cat-like aliens moved quickly to the positions Jake had suggested, just as the Scarex began their assault. The battle was fierce and chaotic. Energy weapons lit up the forest as the two sides exchanged fire. The Scarex were experienced raiders, but the alien defenders fought with the desperation of parents protecting their children. Jake found himself analyzing the battle constantly, spotting weaknesses and opportunities that the alien commander couldn't see. "Commander, 3 raiders are using that fallen tree for cover. If you send 2 warriors around the left side, you can trap them." The tactic worked perfectly. Thekvar began listening to Jake's suggestions more carefully, and the alien defenses became more effective. But then disaster struck. A group of Scarex raiders broke through the defensive line on the right side, using explosives to blast through a section of the protective barrier. They rushed toward the breeding ground entrance, their weapons raised and ready to kill anyone who tried to stop them. "The cubs!" shouted one of the alien mothers, panic in her voice. Jake saw the raiders approaching and made a decision that would change everything. He stood up from behind the protective barrier, still holding Pip, Sage, and Little Blue. "Jake, no!" Dr. Park called out from where she was helping tend wounded defenders. "Get back down!" But Jake was already moving. He carried the cubs toward the threatened entrance, his mind working rapidly. The Scarex raiders would expect the aliens to cower and hide their young. They wouldn't expect someone to bring cubs directly toward the danger. "Trust me," Jake whispered to the cubs. "I have an idea." The cubs seemed to understand. Instead of crying or trying to escape, they held on to Jake tighter and prepared to help however they could. Jake reached the breeding ground entrance just as the Scarex raiders arrived. The raiders stopped in confusion when they saw a strange alien creature carrying 3 cubs directly toward them. "What is that?" one raider snarled in their harsh language. Jake's translator device picked up their words and converted them to English. "Some kind of alien," another replied. "But it has cubs. Grab them." The raiders moved forward, but Jake did something they didn't expect. He started talking to them in their own language, using basic phrases his translator had learned from monitoring their communications. "Wait," Jake said in broken Scarex. "I have information. Important information about defense weaknesses." The raiders paused, confused by this unexpected development. Jake used their hesitation to study their positions and equipment. 3 raiders, plasma rifles, light armor with weak spots at the joints. Pip, Sage, and Little Blue were perfectly still in Jake's arms, but he could feel their small bodies tense and ready. Somehow, they understood what he was planning. "What information?" the lead raider demanded. "The breeding ground has secret tunnels," Jake lied smoothly. "I can show you where the most valuable cubs are hidden." It was a desperate gambit, but it worked. The raiders lowered their weapons slightly, interested in what this strange creature was telling them. That was when Jake struck. He suddenly threw himself to the side, rolling behind a large root formation. At the same time, the cubs leaped from his arms with surprising coordination. Pip rolled under the legs of one raider, tripping him. Sage bit another raider's ankle, causing him to stumble. Little Blue actually grabbed a fallen energy weapon and tried to drag it toward Jake. The raiders were so shocked by the coordinated attack from cubs that they hesitated for a crucial second. Jake used that second to grab the energy weapon Little Blue had brought him and fire at the nearest raider's weak point. "Impossible!" the lead raider shouted as his comrade fell. "Cubs don't fight. They run and hide." "These cubs don't run," Jake said, firing again. "They protect their family." The battle at the entrance was brief but fierce. Jake's military training and the cubs' unexpected assistance proved too much for the confused raiders. Within minutes, the immediate threat was neutralized. Commander. Thekvar arrived with reinforcements just as Jake was checking to make sure the cubs were unhurt. "By the ancient spirits," Thekvar said in amazement, "you defeated Scarex raiders, with cubs helping you." News of the incredible defense spread quickly through the communication network. The other Scarex forces, already struggling against the improved alien tactics Jake had suggested, began to retreat when they learned that cubs were actually fighting alongside their defenders. "Retreat!" came the panicked voice over the Scarex communication channels. "The cubs have turned into warriors! This world is cursed!" Within an hour, all 3 Scarex ships had fled the planet, their raid a complete failure. For the first time in generations, the cat-like aliens had successfully defended their breeding grounds without losing a single cub. Elder Zarthek found Jake sitting with the cubs near the entrance to the breeding ground. Pip was perched on Jake's shoulder, proudly showing off a small scratch it had received during the fight. Sage was examining the energy weapon it had helped capture. Little Blue was standing guard, still alert for any remaining threats. "Jake Martinez," Zarthek said formally, "you have proven yourself in the greatest test possible. You risked your life to protect our cubs, and they fought beside you like the warriors of old legends." Jake looked up at the elder, exhausted but happy. "They were amazing. I've never seen anything like it. Cubs that young shouldn't be able to coordinate tactics like that." "The heart bond," Zarthek said with wonder. "It has awakened abilities in them that we thought were lost forever. They fought because they believed in their protector." They were brave because you showed them how to be brave. The cubs seemed to understand that they had done something special. They sat up straighter and purred louder, proud of their role in defending their home. The council will want to hear about this, Zarthek continued. Cubs who fight alongside their chosen protector. A human who understands warfare better than our own commanders, a bond that makes both species stronger. Jake gently stroked each cub's fur, marveling at what they had accomplished together. What happens now? Now, Zarthek said with a smile, we prepare for a new age. An age where cubs choose their own protectors, where heart bonds make us stronger, and where humans and our people stand together against common enemies. The cubs purred in agreement, snuggling closer to their chosen protector. They had proven that love and trust could overcome any challenge, and that sometimes the strongest. Warriors come in the smallest packages. 6 months after the Scarex attack, Jake Martinez stood in the Great Council chamber once again. But this time, everything was different. The 12 elders looked at him with respect instead of suspicion. Pip, Sage, and Little Blue sat beside, him wearing small ceremonial robes made from the finest plant fibers. They had grown larger and stronger, but they still refused to be separated from their chosen protector for more than a few hours at a time. Today marks a historic moment for our people, Elder Zarthek announced to the gathered crowd. The chamber was packed with aliens who had come to witness this unprecedented ceremony. Today, we officially recognize the first cub heart in over 1,000 years, and we establish new laws for a new age. Jake felt nervous, despite all the time he'd had to prepare for this moment. Beside him, the cubs sensed his emotions and made soft, comforting sounds. Pip had developed a habit of patting Jake's hand when he was worried. Sage would lean against him and purr. Little Blue would position itself protectively and glare at anything that might be causing Jake stress. Elder Velanya stood and opened the ancient book of laws. For generations, our law stated that no outsider could touch our cubs without facing death. This law served us well during times of war and danger, but times have changed, and our laws must change with them. She turned to a new page, one that had been added just for this ceremony. From this day forward, let it be written that cubs may choose their own protectors from any species, any world, any people who show them kindness and love. These chosen protectors shall be known as cub hearts, and they shall be welcomed into our families as if they were born among us. The crowd murmured approval. Many of the aliens present had witnessed Jake's courage during the Scarex attack, and word of the cubs' remarkable abilities had spread throughout their society. Commander. Tekvar stepped forward wearing his formal military robes. Jake Martinez has proven himself not only as a protector of cubs, but as a warrior and strategist who helped save our breeding grounds from our ancient enemies. His tactical knowledge and courage turned certain defeat into glorious victory. Doctor. Park watched from the audience with tears in her eyes. Beside her sat Ryan Cole, Amy Foster, and Chris Bailey. The human crew had been given honorary status as friends of the alien people, and they were now free to visit the planet whenever they wished. The heart bond between Jake Martinez and our cubs has brought benefits to both species, Elder Fikran continued the ceremony. The cubs have shown intelligence and bravery far beyond their years. The human has gained new understanding of our ways and helped us rediscover ancient wisdom we had forgotten. Pip chose that moment to demonstrate its intelligence by climbing onto the podium and bowing formally to each elder in turn. The crowd laughed and applauded as the small cub returned to Jake's side, clearly proud of itself. In recognition of his unique status, Elder Zarthek said, Jake Martinez is hereby granted citizenship in our world, with all rights and responsibilities that come with it. He may come and go as he pleases, but he will always have a home here among us. Jake stood up, carrying Little Blue, while Pip and Sage flanked him on either side. Thank you, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. 6 months ago, I was just a human captain exploring space. I never expected to find a new family on an alien world. But these 3 cubs chose me as their protector, and that choice changed my life forever. He looked down at his cubs with obvious love. Pip, Sage, and Little Blue have taught me that family isn't about what species you are or where you come from. It's about who you choose to love and protect. They chose me, and I choose them, every single day. The cubs purred loudly, understanding. The emotion in Jake's voice, even if they didn't understand every word. But our relationship isn't just about us, Jake continued. It's about proving that different species can work together, learn from each other, and become stronger together. The cubs helped me understand your people, and I helped them become braver and smarter than anyone thought possible. Elder Mordan, who had been the most skeptical about accepting Jake, stood up slowly. I was wrong to oppose this bond, he said quietly. I see now that the cubs chose wisely. Jake Martinez has brought honor to our people and strength to our defenses. As the formal ceremony concluded, Jake's birth families approached. Over the months, he had developed close relationships with all 3 sets of parents. Pip's mother had become like a sister to him, teaching him about cub care and alien culture. Sage's father had shared stories of their history and traditions. Little Blue's parents had helped Jake learn their language and customs. Welcome to the family, Cub Heart, Pip's mother said, using the formal words of adoption. May your bond with our cubs grow stronger with each passing day. The celebration that followed lasted well into the night. The entire city joined in, with music, dancing, and feast foods that Jake had learned to love during his time on the planet. The cubs were the center of attention, showing off their new skills and abilities to admiring crowds. Jake watched as Pip demonstrated its problem-solving abilities by figuring out a complex puzzle in minutes. Sage showed its artistic talents by creating beautiful patterns with colored sand. Little Blue amazed everyone by sparring with warriors much larger than itself, using techniques Jake had taught it combined with natural alien fighting instincts. There, remarkable, Dr. Park said, approaching Jake during a quiet moment. I've been studying the development of their abilities, and it's unprecedented. The heart bond isn't just making them smarter, it's unlocking genetic potentials that normally remain dormant. What do you mean? Jake asked, watching as the cubs played with other young aliens who looked up to them as heroes. I mean that these 3 cubs are becoming something new, Dr. Park explained. Not just regular members of their species, but enhanced versions with capabilities that could benefit their entire civilization. And it's all because of their bond with you. Jake felt a mixture of pride and responsibility. No pressure there. Amy Foster joined them, carrying a data pad full of scientific readings. The Council has asked if you'd be willing to help establish a formal exchange program between our species. They want to send some of their people to learn about human technology and culture, while humans come here to study their bioengineering and environmental harmony. Of course, Jake said immediately. The more our peoples learn from each other, the stronger we'll both become. Chris Bailey appeared with a huge grin on his face. You should see what they're letting me study now, living buildings that can repair themselves, plants that generate electricity, transportation systems that work in perfect harmony with nature. This place is an engineer's paradise. Ryan Cole was the last to approach, looking more relaxed than Jake had seen him in months. The military applications of what we've learned here could revolutionize space defense, he said quietly. Not just the technology, but the tactical insights. The way you coordinated with the Cubs during that fight, I've never seen anything like it. As the celebration continued around them, Jake realized how much his life had changed. He was no longer just a human exploring space. He was a bridge between two species, a protector of alien cubs, and a citizen of two worlds. The Cubs seemed to sense the importance.